Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It's great to be with you all. It's been great. I remember doing a training with some of you there at Foothills and the pastoral care team. So it's nice to see everybody, or at least feel everybody's presence.
That's right.
It's nice to work with you again, Elaine.
It's always a pleasure. We got to work with each other back in Minneapolis, and we can be
Yeah,
here together this morning as well.
that's great.
Well, I'm so glad you're our guest as we kick off this series thinking about rage, grief, and goodness. And I thought I'd just put those topics out there at the top of our conversation here. And I'm curious, Karen, how do you understand the relationship between rage, grief, and goodness? Or just what does that trifecta bring up for you?
No easy subject there, Elaine.
Yeah, just coming out with a big question at the beginning.
Well, it's funny. I thought about this yesterday a little bit, and yesterday is August 28th, I believe, and I couldn't believe all of the things that I had feelings about that had to do with this day. One, as it was the anniversary of Katrina today, I guess, some last 24 hours,
Mhm.
in 2005. It's the almost the end of a 20-year war, a futile effort, and with lots of devastation and waste and horror in Afghanistan. It's also a time of COVID. We're in a pandemic. And yesterday was also the anniversary of the voting March on Washington, and another demonstration took place in DC yesterday to fight for voting rights. So there's a certain loss in all of those things. And also Emmett Till, a young teenager that was uh, brutally murdered, that kicked off a lot of the civil rights movement in 1955. It's his
Mhm.
anniversary too. So Emmett Till, Katrina, Afghanistan, COVID, and voting rights, loss, all of those things leads to grief, because I think you can't talk about grief until you talk about loss. That's the first
Mhm.
sort of impetus for it. And grief, this kind of grief of all of these things that are recurring again. Emmett Till, but we see George Floyd. Katrina, now we see Ida. Afghanistan, now we see Al ISIS again. COVID, people aren't wearing masks. Voting rights being turned back. So that leads to rage. So loss and grief and rage, I see a trajectory there. But rage also leads me to have a sincere desire for the manifestation of goodness. So I think they're all connected, because without rage, rage is a desire for goodness, I think, in many ways.
I wonder if we could dig into that piece around rage a little more. And I'm just curious, how is rage, in your experience, Karen, how's that hooked up to your deepest values? And I wonder if something comes to mind in your life right now that brings up rage that you're dealing with, moving with.
Well, I'll speak from the personal. Um, the personal is political always, and as an African American, I have a particular kind of rage. But I think it was James Baldwin who said, I think his quote was, if I can get it right, says if um, if you are a conscious African American, a conscious Negro in America, you are in a constant state of rage. But rage cannot be displayed. So it must be managed. And so throughout my history and the DNA of my people, we've always managed our rage in this country in order to be, to stay alive. We can't be rageful. We can't be angry. It's not acceptable, or we will be face consequences for that at work, at home, in the streets, everywhere. But I want to share with you something personal. I sent you a little clip of my DNA. And I was wondering if you could put that up on the screen. Where I was from, and who I am. I am a product of navigation. I am a product of exploration. I am an existence that never existed in the world before, an African American. And here's the the content of my DNA. And as you can see, it's really a mix of things that I never quite believed. Uh, I think you can see it there. Yeah. Um, but when I first saw this, along with the map that went along with it, I was shocked, curious. Lots of things I thought I am not. And this percentage of European uh, and Swedish and Jewish and Irish and Scottish blood in me um, it could give me nothing but grief and sadness and rage because I couldn't have gotten that blood without rape and kidnapping and slavery and enslavement. So I think, but at the same time, I'm really um, kind of proud to be this person that survived this horrid world catastrophe. I am a creation of this mess. I am a creation of capitalism and imperialism and absolute horror. But here I am. I sit with you today, speaking English in the United States with all of this in me. So there's a certain rage that I have about it, but it's also a certain curiosity that um, with my commitments as a humanist, I think I'm able to explore this reality with critical thinking, with certain understanding about ethics, um, wanting social justice, um, my commitment to service and participation in the world, not giving up, my commitment to empathy. Um, because I was on the other side of the ocean. I worked at the Field Museum for a while, and I worked in the pits of these castles that were holding Africans before they were exported to the Americas. And so I've been on the other side of that ocean and looked out um, and stood in rooms where they looked through little slits to pick out which Africans they wanted because the Europeans didn't want the Africans to see them picking them out. Just this ridiculous story that I'm a product of. I still have a certain commitment to um, the potential of human goodness, but I know that evil and profit and certain systems take away goodness. And people may be good, but they don't get a chance to demonstrate it because they've been filled with a particular ideology.
Karen, I wonder what keeps you going in feeling this presence of human capacity for evil and knowing it's, you know, part of your lineage, it's part of all of our lineages, it's here in the present moment with us. What keeps you moving forward, or uh, what inspires or energizes you in the midst of that reality?
Yeah, that's a tough one. But I think about where I was born. I was born in Philadelphia, and I was born next to Constitutional Hall. I was born next door to in a hospital next door to where the Constitution was formed, and down the street from the Liberty Bell. And this is kind of old fashioned and corny, but what keeps me going is the sort of the experiment of America, as fraught with schizophrenia and psychosis as the founders were, in creating all people are created equal except you. Um, you know, all of that schizophrenia around what America is. I still that sort of still keeps me going because it is an experiment, and experiments take time. And I really value being a part of this experiment. I've thought about leaving this country, like so many Black Americans, and even in the past few years have left and are living great lives without racial stigma in other parts of the world, and they're just joyous and happy. And I know what that's like, living in other places in the world where people don't follow you in stores and treat you like crap every day. But I'm committed. I think that's what keeps me going because my rage, Black rage in particular, has always served America. well.
Mm,
Because without Black rage, we would not have had an end of slavery because we freed ourselves largely. Without Black rage, there'd be no civil rights movement. Without Black rage, there'd be, I mean, there's almost nothing that moves the country doesn't move forward without Black rage, period.
mm.
Um, and I think our Black rage is what, as much as a headache it is, it's mostly irritating to have to pay. I call it a black tax every day I go outside. It's a tax I got to pay to just exist in this country. But I uh, I think it is the hope of America is our rage, and that's what keeps me going.
Karen, is there a difference in your personal experience between the rage that you feel as an individual human being and the Black rage that you are a part of as a collective experience?
Well, it's an interesting question. As an individual human being, I have like this really anthropological attitude towards most things. I look at things from a 30,000 foot view,
Mhm.
and I personally, have incorporated my identity with my humanity. So I am comfortable in my rage. I'm comfortable with it. Humor is a big part of it. If you spend time on YouTube looking at black comedians, I mean, we laugh about this all the time. We laugh all the time. We laugh about slavery. We laugh about, I mean, we make jokes about every single thing that particularly white people feel uncomfortable about, but we laugh about it. We laugh about how, well, I wouldn't have been a good slave because, there's a whole litany of humor about how I wouldn't have been a good slave because, and they're hilarious. But it has been that, um, this, turning things inside out and upside down, um, taking it, these weird vantage points on things. I feel as a Black American and as an individual, I've been able to see the world in ways that others can't. And as an anthropological humanist, I really do value all of the craziness of what humans are, all the madness, because it's all what we are capable of. So, nothing surprises me, nothing am I afraid of. I've spent time with white supremacists and taxi cabs. I've prayed over their kids in hospitals, and I've I've had some incredible experiences with people that um, probably on most good days would hate me, and I've loved them into being into a new moment. So um, I really find humanity just incredibly not only inviting but entertaining and exciting. So that excitement about human behavior is it's just I just live for it. That's my spirituality is the great variety of humanity and how it shows up every day and how it can be manipulated, how it can be done for good, for evil. Um, it's just extraordinary. Human beings are extraordinary. I I,
Mm.
I get no rest from thinking about their potential. I'm
I'm
rambling,
gonna
but go ahead.
Oh, no, that's great. I'm gonna put one more question out there, and then we're gonna open it up to
Sure.
questions in the Zoom chat.
Yes.
So Karen, I'm curious, you've spent decades of your life serving as a chaplain in multiple contexts, in medical contexts, in prisons, in school settings, and you've been a trainer of chaplains. And I'm really curious about your experience of ministering to people, like, for example, the example that you just shared, praying over the body of a child of someone who you knew was a white supremacist,
Hmm.
or being with people who were so deeply different from you in their core values and understandings of whose humanity has value. What what do you bring to those exchanges? How do you show up with authenticity in those spaces?
I let go of myself. Um, I take myself almost not out of the picture. I let go of everything I've ever held on to and just hold on to it loosely so that I can maybe grasp onto something new. I don't know any other way of describing it. I hold on to everything I know loosely so I could grasp onto something new. And I'll give you one example of that. When I was working in maximum security prisons with men in Illinois, and this is like Shawshank Redemption, this kind of prison is just like, you know, real old school scary prison. But
Mhm.
yeah, I remember this one guy I used to visit, and he kept going. He would start at the back. I mean, the cell is only but so big, but he would like always be in the back. And I say, "Anything you want to talk to the chaplain about today, brother?" And he's just always, "No, no, no." So I don't look up what people have done, but eventually I did find out what he had done, and every time I kept pursuing him, he kept coming a little closer, 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 because I just wouldn't give up on him. And then when I decide to not stand on the yellow line that keeps him arm's length away from me from the bars and came right to the bars, um, that's when he came to me because he knew that I was going to treat him like a human being. But this guy had done some horrible things, and he had he had sexually assaulted, a dozen women. He was going to spend his rest of his life in prison, and a couple people had a couple women had died. So he's definitely, what we call the worst of the worst. He's this little chubby guy that, just like kind of slouch over middle age at this point. And when he came to the front of the cell one day and told me about some of the things that he's regretting in his life. He had really made a lot of changes in his life internally, but he never talked to anybody about it. But he joined a class that I did, and we showed a film in the class about I don't know, it was just life, and it was a childbirth scene in the film. And he had never seen childbirth, and he just started crying in the group. And I'm like, what the hell is he crying about? It's like, dude. So chaplains get kind of tough in prison too. But we went back, and he went back to his cell, and I said, man, what was that about? He says, I never thought about women giving birth. I've just only seen them as something to use. But I never saw anything like that. And it just moved him so deeply. He started writing poetry he wanted to read about childbirth and how babies grow up because he was abandoned by everybody in his life. He's just lived a horrible life as a child. Um, but that kind of change, that kind of potential in somebody who was considered the worst of the worst, who's done horrible things, um, for me to be able to learn to love him um, was really a big challenge, and it was a challenge to my ability to deal with loss and grief of others that have he's harmed, um, but also the loss and grief of holding on to things that I thought I had to hold on to. I hate, these kind of people. That's a terrible human being. I had to let that go, so I couldn't hold on to it real tightly. I had to hold on to it loosely in order to be in a relationship with him.
Mm.
I think that's it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Um, I'm so touched by that. Thank you, Karen.